Over 150 climate change protesters storming the field at the Harvard-Yale football game, causing a 48-minute delay as they sat on the field, and protesters demanding that both schools divest their holdings in fossil fuel companies. Harvard University student and campus reform correspondent Christopher Colby blasting the protest as, quote, empty activism, and he joins us now. Good to see you, Christopher. Thanks very much. You were at the game. Did they get any support at all from the audience?
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. As far as the audience's reaction to this protest, I know a few friends of mine who, they're European or whatever, they don't know football too well, and they thought it was just time to storm the field. I don't think many people really knew what was going on at the start, which is kind of funny. But when we realized that it was a divest protest, we all got kind of a little annoyed because I think of all the causes to protest for, divest is one of them that makes the least amount of sense. So many good things to protest about. I just don't think this is one of them.
I don't even think you can call this a protest, Chris. I mean, this is a disruption, and thank you for being with us. Once again, the environmentalists just annoying everybody, upsetting their plans, ruining their fun. I hate to say it, but you have players here who've trained for months and months. Their fans, their families have come to see them. So I have to imagine that some of the young crowd, many of them who are probably sympathetic to these environmental causes, even they were probably a little annoyed that these environmentalists had come and ruined their fun.
Yeah, we definitely have a liberal atmosphere on campus that says, it's good to take care of the planet for future generations. People are sympathetic to this. But something kind of struck a chord, I think, with most people, that this protest in reality, by default, just really can't do anything. There's no situation in which our university president... Yeah, there's no situation in which somebody's going to walk on the field and say, you guys are right, we're done investing in fossil fuels. That's just not going to happen. That's why the protest was useless.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. Often you have these people that like things, share things, but then they don't actually take action. So I want to highlight that. But given that you are at Harvard, you write for campus reform, what's been the reaction, especially since you called it empty activism?
Yeah. Well, the Leadership Institute's campus reform hits on this a lot. I think just fundamentally, you look at protest as something that raises awareness. This is raising awareness for a cause that, really just can't perform really well on logical grounds. Anybody, whether it's the Harvard administration, our university presidents, both at Harvard and Yale, or, economists can tell you that divestment is not the answer for what these people are looking for. That's why it's empty activism. Because any reasonable Yale or Harvard student, I trust that both of us are pretty smart, despite the game, can look at these points and say, you know what? You're right. Divestment doesn't make much sense. If we really wanted to have actual change, we would open dialogue somewhere, A, off the football field, B, in something other than divestment, and C, in something that can actually institute real change in our world.
Well, that's the thing, Chris. Going back to the game and the forum for which this was presented in. There's been other activism on campus about climate change and so forth over the years. So what was the groundswell with respect to storming the field and getting the game interrupted with respect to, who was totally behind this? Was it a couple different groups? Administration, faculty? What's the background on that?
Well, I think it's, things reach critical mass when you get alumni and a current student body in the action. And, when a few people hear that it's time to rush the field, already at a football game, this sounds pretty fun. But then you throw in sort of this, you sort of throw in this liberal theme like, oh, and we're also going to be protesting something. People are like, oh, let's do it. Let's 100% do it. Without even asking me what they're really protesting. There's lots of things that, people at this campus care a lot about. Divestment is one of those that I think people just bandwagon a lot. Yeah, I don't really know how effective the protest was just because of that.
Chris, I have to say, I'm sort of tickled that a lot of older alums who have basically ignored all the student protests, all the disruptions on campus, all the ridiculous political correctness, et cetera, had to confront this. They were at the Harvard-Yale game. Many of my friends were there. And for the first time, maybe they were inconvenienced by things that are going on daily on college campuses. Trustees are not willing to speak up. The administration doesn't speak up and push back on all this stuff. I'm sorry it happened because I'm sure for you and your friends, it wasn't that much fun. No. But you know what? People need to kind of see what this really means in terms of disrupting the life of students on campus.
Yeah, and some of the argument of the protesters, and I've talked with my fellow students about this, is, well, that's the point. This is the biggest weekend of the year for us to have a mutual school spirit. That's why we're protesting now, so that you can be incredibly inconvenienced. Well, I mean, look, okay, I get it. You want to inconvenience us, but at least choose something that's worth protesting on, right? And this isn't the day to do it because this is a university event. I think the Yale spokesperson put it on the head. This is your peers, these football players who are they're performing. This is what they've been working all year for. Yeah. The alumni and the current students, they care about that. Getting in the way of that isn't constructive, in my opinion.
Very good points, Christopher. Thank you very much for being here. We wish you the best. Before we head